a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, with the general chapter, the 25th general chapter in 2016. One of the, you all I think know this, but for the first time, there were lay people present for a good chunk of the chapter, and we were asked from the five conferences. So one lay person was asked from each conference to come and be present at a week of the general chapter. It wasn't my first time at a general chapter. I always feel really strange saying that because there are lots of Redemptorists who haven't been to a general chapter. And I was there in 2009, and the only reason that came about was because the document called into communion for mission had been published, and we were, myself and Ahit Patna from the Netherlands, were there to kind of present that document to the delegates, or the capitulars they're called, and let them know what had been published and what was in it. So we kind of in-serviced everybody on the document. And I felt a bit like a fraud because I hadn't been part of the writing of the document, just making it kind of user-friendly. But still, it was a wonderful experience. It was fabulous. So this time around, it was very different. The five of us were asked to come. And once we said yes, we were given a job. So we were to sit at the tables with the capitulars, be part of all the discussions. We were there when the new council was elected, when the Superior General was re-elected, which was a fabulous experience of kind of the worldwide face of the congregation. On the fourth day, we were asked, the five of us, to present a joint presentation on the state of partnership in mission across the world. No small task. So it wasn't like there was one face of partnership in mission. You think about Latin America, North America, Africa and Madagascar, Europe, Asia. It's a vast reality, and still there's so much commonality in Redemptorist life and in partnership in mission. So we put together a panel discussion, was the way we chose to do it. And I kind of anchored it by giving a little presentation on partnership in mission and what our experience had been. We told some of the good and the bad stories of partnership in mission. And then each of us had a little piece that we added. And then there was a conversation with everybody. And people talked back to us. In fact, it was the only session that week that we ran out of time. It was very animated. So when the delegates to the chapter pondered that experience of having us with them for a week and that presentation, there's a decision in the general chapter that says that there will be lay people at every general chapter and that they will represent all five conferences. So that's pretty significant. There's another decision that said that an office of partnership in mission would be established and that it would work with the conference commissions, like the one that sponsored this event, and with the general government to create two things: a directory for partnership in mission and a ratio. Okay, so we'll stop a minute and ask, what are those things? Because this is part of the lingo, right? So a general chapter, first of all, happens every 6 years. So it's not a real common thing. It's just that the longer you live, the faster the 6 years go. So, and a general chapter is the highest authority in the congregation when it's sitting. And it gives direction to the general government for the work of the 6 years to come. So the decisions of a general chapter are really significant. So the fact that one of those decisions, or actually three of those decisions, have to do with partners in mission is pretty significant. It sort of makes you feel like this is important. One of the clarifications that's come around since the last general chapter, though, I find very helpful. We can easily, I can easily get sucked into thinking that partnership in mission is a goal in itself, that just our collaboration is a significant goal accomplished. And that may be true, but partnership in mission is never for its own sake. It's always for mission. And so it's one of the fundamental priorities of the congregation. It's not an apostolic priority, so don't fit in CARP. It's not a missionary priority. It's a fundamental priority. It's one of the means through which we're enabled to reach out to the most abandoned, and particularly those that we've named in our CARP as our significant bodies, young people, those who haven't heard the word of God. What's the third one? Immigrant and migrant, right. So it's with partners in mission that we can, the congregation can do that most effectively. So another fundamental priority is formation, right? Another fundamental priority is finances. So it's the means through which the apostolic and missionary priorities are accomplished. So does that make sense? Okay. So the general government put together the way they chose to go about addressing the decisions of the general chapter was to set up a general secretariat for evangelization. So that's probably one of the biggest changes. It's not an administrative change, it's a pastoral change. Yeah.
Last evening somebody asked me what a secretariat was.
Ah, another lingo thing. Okay, so there are secretariats and commissions. And we have them at the North American level, and we have them at the conference level. I think we might have them at unit levels too, right? So it seems to me a commission is a bit of a working group, often. Now, somebody, maybe a Redemptorist who knows something about this might say more, because it's a hard distinction, and I don't think it's clear. Does anybody have a real clear one? Seems to me a secretariat is sort of a higher level thing. Yeah, a higher level kind of body, and a commission is a working group. Like we always think about, I know in Canada, we've talked about partnership and mission and always talked about a commission, and it's always been a group with not just a mission, it's a commission with a job to do and tasks and projects. So, and a secretariat is more higher level oversight kind of thing. Would that be fair? Okay. All right, there you go. How's that? If it's not true, we'll say it is. So that's good. So there are secretariats at the general level of the Redemptorist. One is finances, right? One is formation, and the other is evangelization. And under evangelization, you might think of it as a bit of an umbrella. The way the general government has structured this is that under evangelization, there's peace, justice, and the integrity of creation. There's the extraordinary proclamation. Francis, you're on the peace, justice, that one. There's a new missionary initiatives group. There's partnership in mission. There's Africa and Madagascar, youth and young adult ministry. And there's 6, so I'm missing one. But so they all come under evangelization. That's it, migrants and immigrants. Right on. So they asked me to chair the General Commission for Partnership in Mission that would come under that secretariat. Right? So we're one of the fundamental priorities that are there. So the members of that commission working under the secretariat are to meet once a year, face to face. And we had 2 projects, the writing of that directory and the ratio. The members of the General Secretariat for Evangelization are all Redemptorists, professed Redemptorists, except for me. And that really felt like a real steep learning curve when I went to Rome for the first meeting. Like, you remember Sesame Street? And one of these things is not like the other. It was really like that. It's like, why am I here? How did this happen? And it doesn't take long to get comfortable. It's the languages and the thought that you're representing the entire world in a way. At first it felt very weighty and a bit much for someone 5 feet tall. But then you realize there's so many great people out there that we're asked to work with and to carry forth the projects that are set before us. And it's a great opportunity to see how the congregation actually works at that level. To sit with the general consultor from Africa, with Nicholas, and to hear his story, and the general consultor from Asia, and to hear his story and his reality. It's a fascinating experience. So, and there's a lot of real work being done. So immediately, the first thing happened was the General Secretariat met, and then we made suggestions to the general government about who the members of our commissions would be. Each one of us was to chair one of the commissions under the Secretariat. And so we made recommendations from every continent about who could be approached to serve on the commissions, and then the general government appointed them. And the next time my commission met, like with me as chair, there are 3 members of the general government on it, and 1 lay person from each continent. So it's a fascinating experience, and even trying to negotiate the languages. We operate in English, Spanish, a little bit of Portuguese thrown in, and a bit of French. One of our biggest trials was that the guy who was the layman who was appointed as a delegate, as a member of the commission, died after our first meeting. He was only 42. And he was just a lovely guy with a great laugh, father of 2 young kids, and that really struck us. That was really hard for someone I'd only met once, like for 5 significant days. That first meeting, we began to work on the structure of the directory first, and what it would look like. How would we give shape to partnership in mission across the entire congregation? So one of the things we did in one of our spare time shaped a lot. It had nothing to do with the directory. The 2 archivists, and I have to think about their names. Anyway, the 2, Father Beckel, and the other one I won't remember. They asked me if I would like to go to the archives. And I said, oh yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I'd really like to go to the archives. And I'd had a conversation with Father Lahaye is the other one. We had a conversation about something nothing to do with any of this that had to do with Newfoundland. And we'd been back and forth on correspondence. So he said, come on down, I'll show you around. So I said, can some of the others come? And he said, sure. So we all went down, and they took us through the archives, like when you go back further and further into the depths of the building, and you're going back in history and seeing how the provinces have changed. You start in the most recent room, and you go back and back to when there was 2 provinces. It was really an experience, like of walking back through history, and you get the sense that you're going further and further into the building. Then he said, would you like to see the Holy of Holies? I said, not knowing. I said, sure, love to. And they took us into this room that was tall and dark, and you knew right away there was something special. These were the Alphonsian writings. And he said to me, can you climb a ladder? I said, how tall? Because this is a tall room. And he said, just the 3rd shelf over there. So I went over, and he said, take down this one box that has ribbons on it. So I took down the box with the ribbons, and he said, open it. So I laid it on the table really carefully and pulled the ribbons. And inside there were 4 things put like jigsaw puzzle like. And he said, that one, can you read Italian? I said, no. And he started to read. And it was spidery kind of handwriting, and it was a lined margin with a wide margin on the left. And it was, Jesus is both sheep and shepherd, is the way it starts. It was Alphonse's first homily, handwritten. It was like, and of course, all I could do was cry, right? But when I looked around, everybody in the room was crying. And Father Lahaye said, why are you all crying? And we said, well, we've never seen Alphonse's own handwriting before. And he said, this is lovely. But it was one of the things that bonded the group most. It wasn't any of the work we did. I think that's what makes me so certain that it's who we are that really bonds us, not so much what we're doing. But that changed everything. The experience of standing over this pile of papers and crying because we were looking at Alphonse's own handwriting was just an amazing experience. And we looked at all kinds of other things too, but that really stands in my mind. And we went back, we were different. I can't really tell you how, but the sense of the group was formed. And everybody knew why we were in this room and why we were on this commission. So each of us was sent away with writing tasks. And so right now, the directory is nearing completion. It will have 4 chapters, and it's been presented at the mid-sexennial meetings mid-sexennial meetings, another one of those terms. Every 6 years there's a general chapter. Halfway through, since the 90s, halfway through a sexennium, a 6-year term, there's a mid-sexennial meeting. It's like a check-in or a check-up time. And it gives everybody a chance to say, how are we doing? Where do we need to go? How do we need to get there? So we were asked to have that directory ready for the mid-sexennial meeting for a final kind of consultation. There's been 3 rounds of consultations. And this was the last one. And we just met in Portugal last week. And our job as a commission was to review all the feedback from all 5 mid-sexennial meetings and submit that a revised draft to the general government.
The mid-sexennial meeting in each conference?
Yes. So ours was, the one for North America was in September in West End, New Jersey. And all throughout. The last one to be done was Asia. And that was just the week before. So trying to get the feedback from Asia was a bit of a rush, but it happened. So that's gone to the general government for them to look over. The next thing we did during that gathering was we began to draft up the ratio. So what's a ratio? So if a directory gives, it's like the Secretariat and Commission thing. The directory gives the broad scope. What is partnership in mission? So the first chapter is, what are the fundamentals? Some of the things we've been talking about all this weekend. What are the bases? What's the theological basis? What's the experiential basis? What do you hope to do? How are you a fundamental priority? So the first chapter is the fundamentals. Second chapter is the people. What are the forms of partnership and mission? Third chapter is about formation. And the fourth chapter is structures that are necessary to support partnership and mission. Then the directory will really be chapter 3 fleshed out. It's the the ratio part will be the 3rd chapter of the directory, fleshed out more. How do we enter into appropriate formation for, in particular, Redemptorist associates, lay missionaries of the Most Holy Redeemer, and the professed Redemptorists with whom and among whom they work? So that's our job. So we drafted up an outline for that ratio, and each of us has gone away, a few of us are gone away with chapters to write or draft up, pieces to put together. And a small working group will meet probably in Newfoundland in May and look at what we've begun to put together. So our hope would be that both the ratio will be ready for the next general chapter, and that the directory will have been in effect as an experimental document by the time for 3 years, by the time the next general chapter comes around. So that's where all that is. Questions, comments, concerns?
Would you like a glass of water?
I'm good, thank you. I'll get a glass of wine in a minute. The other thing, I guess, that's important in all of that is so last week in Portugal, the General Commission for Partnership and Mission met. Right after that, the Secretariat, the General Secretariat for Evangelization met. And it's obvious that everybody works really hard. What's come out of all those commissions is phenomenal stuff. Everybody's working on either guidelines or recommendations or a directory or something like that. So to see how these commissions really have been working groups is really interesting. So you don't get to see that when you're only in the piece about partnership and mission. It's the other place where you get to see the whole picture, and it's really inspiring to see. When I think about our commission and how many different languages we're working in and trying to understand one another and different realities and different cultures, and the culture of the professed Redemptorists and in different countries too. So it's really inspiring. Yeah.
So how is partnership and mission taking form in other parts of our world? Fortunately, we have our wonderful people here from Portugal to give us that image. But what else? Is it like really happening like it is in Portugal, elsewhere too?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the inspiring things that has become obvious to me is that despite the fact that we're in so many different cultures and so many different realities, everywhere there's some form of partnership in mission, and there's a surprising amount of similarity. What we're trying to do with the directory is bring common language to similar realities. So everybody in the world might not call Redemptorist associates what we know as Redemptorist associates. These people who come together once a month or so for faith sharing, who really feel drawn to the Redemptorist spirit and spirituality, who want to find that spiritual home and be animated to go out into the world as really, sons and daughters of Alphonsus in that spirit. Those people exist in every conference. They don't always call them Redemptorist associates. So what we wanted was to bring together the reality and begin to use the same language. So I think we're getting there. Some people in Europe, they're often called Redemptorist laity. So what we would call a Redemptorist associate, you can't always use the word associate in every culture. Remember we talked about collaboration and how that turned out to be a bad word in some places? Well, same thing with associate. In some cultures, it has legal connotations. So you can't use it. But the reality is the same. So what we finally settled on was that we're going to use the two terms. So when you see the directory, you'll see Redemptorist associate / laity. That's what that is, Redemptorist associate or Redemptorist laity. And so they're the same thing, just you can't use the word associate in some cultures. Right? So that's almost everywhere. There are what looks like lay missionaries of the Most Holy Redeemer almost everywhere too. But what happens is sometimes the congregation, the professed members, or the congregation itself in a particular local area has been hesitant to adopt that closer form of collaboration or partnership. And so you have people who we would clearly recognize as lay missionaries of the Most Holy Redeemer, but they're not called that. And so what this will do is encourage the units to adopt the same terminology. And so part of the mid-sexennial meetings in each conference, if they weren't using the terminology, there was an encouragement that was posed to them as a bit more than an encouragement in some cases, to use the same terminology. Don't let fear stop you, So that's true. The other thing everybody has is I guess you call them co-workers, or they're often just called lay collaborators, but co-workers. So everybody has those, and Asia in particular has many, many, many. Around the shrines, around like McLaren and Singapore. So they wanted to keep that terminology. So when you see the directory, you'll see the partnership in mission forms that are addressed most clearly are the lay missionary of the Most Holy Redeemer, the Redemptorist associate or laity, the oblate, because that's the only form that's actually mentioned in the general statutes, and there will also be something about co-workers. Some people will say, in North America, the biggest critique we got was about using the word co-worker, because they thought that kind of muddied the waters, but we couldn't leave it out. Decision 11, actually, from the general chapter, actually asked us to explore or to describe the lay partners in all their breadth and richness, and so we couldn't really leave it out. But we were tempted to, actually, but that didn't happen. So that's what you'll see. Any other questions? So what's been really fun is the invitations to go to different places and observe the way other people do things or present something. So going to Portugal last week, and I had met Jose and Teresa before because I went to England in June. Yeah, we went to Liverpool in June. I was asked there were 3 circles of Redemptorist associates who were looking at or discerning whether they wanted to be enrolled. And so they asked if I'd come and lead a retreat in Liverpool. So I said yes, but then Jose and Teresa were going around the Redemptorist houses and missions in Europe And I said, well, why don't you work your schedule if you can so that we meet finally face to face in Liverpool? And they worked it out. So we met in Liverpool and the retreat went ahead. And we ended up with an extra group of Redemptorist associates showing up for the retreat. Who knew there was a fourth group? So they showed up. It was really fun. It was a great event. One of the things that we found out there, and it's happened almost everywhere, is that as people begin to think about the terminology and play with it a bit, people realize more and more where their heart is. There was a woman, Frances, in England, who'd been going to Zimbabwe for years. She's a former teacher, and she'd been going to work with the Redemptorists in Zimbabwe to teach teachers and to work with the young people who gather around the Redemptorists there. She'd never thought about herself as a lay missionary of the Most Holy Redeemer. Never dawned on her that this had anything to do with this call to Redemptorist life and spirit. And to see her face when she finally recognized it was amazing. And it happens almost everywhere. People don't tend to think of themselves the way people looking at them think about them. So that was fascinating. So I've been asked to preach novenas in Ireland. I probably will be going to Zimbabwe next year at some point to do something for the Partners in Mission in Zimbabwe. There are 3 circles of Redemptorist associates just started in Zimbabwe. And even India, where that's never been a reality, there's a mission team working in the slums of Mumbai, a group of lay partners who asked Redemptorists to accompany them, and they're preaching what we know as popular missions, literally in the streets of Mumbai. So there's really some interesting things happening, and just to be able to witness that and be a little piece of it, sometimes it's really humbling. So the other piece of it is, when the general government was asked by Decision 11 to establish an office of partnership and mission, I'm the office. Right, so that I don't quite know how that happened, but it did. And so what happens is a lot of people are in touch with me about a lot of things. So it's mostly about resources and getting started and forming circles. And then the thing about it is I won't hear for a year what happened, and I'll wonder, did anything happen? And all of a sudden I'll get this letter that our 3 circles are ready now for a commitment. Or our 3 circles in Zimbabwe are, okay then. So it really is, it's a weird thing to me, because I'll send them resources, I'll do Skype meetings or Zoom meetings, and we'll talk about things and work, and then I might never hear for months, and all of a sudden I will, and there's something really wonderful. I've never not heard back from a group that asked for something, but it's weird being here and they're in Mumbai, or they're in Harare, or that kind of thing. So it's really been a terrific experience. The time zones are wicked. So I might work all day, and then Harare wants a call at 2 a.m. my time, because the Zoom meeting can't be 2 a.m. their time. So I'll get up and I'll do the meeting and go back to bed. Those kinds of things. That doesn't happen every week or anything, but more regularly than you think, because where are the places wanting it? Africa and Asia, right? So they want to have a chat about something, and it's a 12-hour time difference or a 9-hour time difference. 9.5, because it's Newfoundland. So, yeah, Barbara.
It sounds like there's sort of energy that's building.
Yeah.
And that kind of the time is right for this to happen, where maybe it hadn't been before. So you must see that energy. You're talking about it.
Well, you feel it too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the most exciting things I've ever been part of. Now, I've always felt that way about partnership and mission. And in the early years, there were a few painful things, but there's growing pains in everything. But lately, the last 5 or 6 years, it's been fascinating to see it grow. And I'm eternally grateful to people like David Lauch and Mike Braille and Ray Corriveau and Alicia von Stamwitz and Stan Vrobel and all these people who were there from the beginning. It's taken a lot of people and a lot of partnership and a lot of love and a lot of prayer. And perseverance. I mean, I think that's one of the Redemptorists take the vow, but I think it's a virtue that we all have to pray for. Right? You need it. And because nothing, there's a line, remember the thorn birds? Yeah, the best is bought only at great price. It's the last line in the little legend at the beginning of the book. The best is bought only at great price. And I think it's taken a great lot of expense of love and investment of care to get to this point. And none of us would be doing this if it wasn't for the guidance of the Holy Spirit. There's something in this, hey? I think the Spirit is saying something. When David talks about Vatican II and the fruit of Vatican II, I think we're seeing it. But I think, too, we're seeing the fruit of generations of Redemptorists and partners who have labored in this field. And we're only able to do what we're doing now because Vatican II came along and gave the theology and the impetus to drive this forward.
But isn't this also what Pope Francis
For sure.
wants to happen in the church? David talked about the emerging church.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to find out just what that emerging church is.
Well, do you know, we may never see the end of that, hey?
We won't be alive to see the results.
Well, I certainly won't be, but I'll still be watching.
You will. Oh, yeah. Good point. And you know what? You may not, or you and I may never see the fulfillment of this. We won't. We're kind of planting seeds and doing our bit. But I do think we see glimpses.
Yeah.
And if I look back on it's nearly 30 years that I've been involved. That's nothing in church time. Like that's a yeah, like you blink of the eye, and I see such change. I see such growth in this area that it's phenomenal. We wouldn't be sitting in this room having this conversation. We couldn't if all the things that happened in those 30 years hadn't happened. And again, I'm so grateful for the people who've been part of that. But also,
Standing on their shoulders.
they say that, that you stand on the shoulders of giants and that kind of thing. And I think there's truth to that. They probably wouldn't see themselves that way. But I think that's very true. And I think the main thing about it is that it allows, I would hope that the reason we're doing this and that what it actually does allow is that the Word of God is proclaimed with greater joy and greater effectiveness and greater impetus and greater zeal in places that it couldn't be before. That we need all of us proclaiming God's Word with our lives and with our words in the places where it most needs to be heard. And most often today, that is in your kitchens or your the places where you do your work, your workplaces, your places where you volunteer, supermarkets, the places where we live. It needs all of us all the time. And I think the other thing I realize when I look around is that it is abundant. Like Alphonsus was right. The love of God is kind of crazy, and it's certainly abundant. It's everywhere. I always think about that poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, "Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. And only those with eyes to see take off their shoes. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries." But we see so much. Right? Anything else yeah, Paul.
Just the model that Whitlam had formed years and years ago, is that model still going on?
It is, yeah.
That was always an interesting model, completely different than some of the other things.
Yeah, and a lot of people have a lot more questions about it too, right? Yeah. What happened at Whitlam about how the Redemptorists how they decided to really divest and I think even financially, hey? There's a really empowered group of lay people, not even necessarily Catholic or even Christian, I don't think, who carry forward the patrimony, not just the spiritual patrimony, but the actual patrimony of that province. And many people do have some questions about it. And now Jose and Teresa have probably been to Vidum. Yeah, so they might have something.
I'm not understanding the question.
Yeah, it had to do more with administration.
Some of them.
Yeah.
Only.
Yeah, there's a bigger reality than that for sure there, right?
There's Vitam is a very nice community because there's Agita and Yele is her husband. They live with the religious community in the same floor for some years, and they work in everything that the Redemptorists work. But it's just a good example of a religious community in partnership in mission also. And they have some lay people working in administration tasks, but they have also Redemptorist associates who work in the ministry, the church ministry. So.
Yeah.
They wrote their own rule, did they have a separate rule?
I don't know that.
Associates, called St. Gerard League, whatever it's called. Kind of went along with the beer. I thought my mind was empty. They had presented a separate rule to be approved by Rome at one point.
I don't know. Don't know that.
That's not the point where they are.
But this is
No.
years and years ago.
Yeah. Not that I don't know about that. Yeah. So, any other questions, comments? Yeah, Francis.
What dialogue do you have, or any, because I know your time is so taken up, with other communities that have this going on? Have you?
Yeah, fair bit. That you remember we talked. I told was that just today or yesterday? About there's a North American part.
57,000.
Yeah, there's 57,000 associates, and that's using the same kind of definition we use of Redemptorist associate. That's just in North America. So there is an organized group. They're called the North American Conference of Associates and Religious. There's a conference every 2 years, I think, and they have a publication, both a newsletter and a magazine. That's the magazine's quarterly, and then there's a monthly newsletter. It's worth if you want to take out an individual membership or even a unit level membership, because they have a very good binder of resources for formation. Now, I think our stuff is actually better, but it gives a good picture of what's out there. And it ties you into a network. One of the things they offer every month is what they call a creative conversation, and it's by Zoom, and any member can join. And usually there's a conversation about some topic to do with associates and leadership of associate circles. So interesting to see how different. So there's a difference between men's communities and women's communities. And this is harsh, like this is too cut and dry. Many women's communities tend to have associates that are more prayer partners. And men's communities tend to focus more on mission. But there are very few men's communities part of that network. So it's hard to know what the real situation is. But the women's communities have done more with associates than men's communities have. But as the women's communities age, so do the associates. We face the same reality, although our demographic is actually quite a bit younger than most women's communities. So the big difference you find is that men's communities tend to focus more on mission and involvement in mission, whereas the women's communities, the associates, are largely prayer partners, but not always. Some women's communities, the Sisters of Mercy being one, they have really terrific associates. And they have two kinds of associates like we do. They have the Companions in Mercy, and they have Mercy Associates. Their Companions in Mercy are Our Lay Missionaries of the Most Holy Redeemer, and they have Mercy Associates. Yeah. So they're quite similar to us, and they're quite similar to us in terms of charism and spirituality too. So they're kind of good partners. In Newfoundland, like where I am, every 2 years we have a joint conference of associates of all the religious communities. And Saskatchewan has done the same thing, because the Redemptorist in Saskatoon heard what we did in Newfoundland and did it twice in Saskatoon.
And everybody wants to be at the Redemptorist table.
Yeah, because we have the most fun, which is pretty good. Yeah, so every 2 years we get all. Now there's only 4 religious communities in Newfoundland, so it's not a big deal. But the Mercy and Presentation Sisters have huge numbers of associates, over 100 each. So the room is pretty full, but the loudest table is the Redemptorist. Just saying. Yeah. Pardon? Well, apparently we gotta go to Washington to get those, right? But we're going to take the Newfoundlanders down to Washington. That's a great. So is that a fair picture? Okay, excellent. And
Can I just share one thing?
Yeah.
Just to say that also the Redemptorist teams, the Redemptorist nuns, they also have associates.
Yes.
And at least in Europe. So I don't know if it's the same here.
Here too.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful.